Linus, DPM mentioned that the government can't do it alone, and the others also have to play their part.
Yes.
Could you tell us about how banks, or your particularly OCBC Bank, is dealing with the stresses that you're seeing in your clients, both on the consumer side and the enterprise side?
Well, I think we are clearly very conscious that this is an effort that we all have to come in together. Right. It is not only our responsibility as a banker to the community, but also our social responsibility. In February, we announced our own package of tailored support for our customers, both individuals and businesses. And that support was around having some flexibility into their existing commitments. So in the event that they would need to restructure or to have some moratorium on their principal repayments, we would entertain those requests. At the same time, I think for the SMEs particularly, we have seen quite a number who have been impacted by the disruptions in global supply chain. So therefore, their trade bills and their invoice financings may have requests for it to be termed out a little bit longer to account for the delays. There have also been customers who have sought additional working capital or bridging loans to tide them over this short term. Right. So I think in that light, we are very much in line, and I think we're very happy with the announcement of the enhanced working capital financing loans. The outreach to our SME customers has so far come back with quite positive reaction to those schemes. So the uptake, I think, will start to grow quite quickly over the next few weeks. But I think the question now is more that, as you said, DPM, that if it goes deeper and broader, then how can that support be then, enhanced to be relevant not only for the first-line industries that are in the travel and tourism type sectors, but also to the broader economy. Right. Yeah, and I think there are many who have raised the question of whether a bridging loan, more akin to what we had launched in the global financial crisis, of a larger sum that would then take care of some of the uncertainties and tide them over a longer period of time. I think that is something that companies are looking for, and then with that, then they can focus on the other efforts that they need to do to transform and emerge better after.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of dealing with uncertainty, if there are various measures that we can consider, we can explore. Bridging loan is one of them, but I would suggest that we also look at more broadly how we can have some structural solutions to this problem. During the global financial crisis, trade dried up, not because there was no demand, but because trade finance and trade insurance dried up. And trade finance and trade insurance dried up because there was a lack of confidence on both parties. Buyers were not confident that the sellers would deliver the goods, and sellers were not confident that buyers will deliver the money. But today, with the digital technology and digital payment system, in fact, you can have some assurance, particularly with a trusted third party, that my goods have left my port, the goods are halfway, in the sea, and the goods have arrived at the other port. So the tracking and tracing of goods in transit is now possible, and therefore the flow of finance and flow of data can be much better integrated, and the flow of insurance can be much better integrated. For us, we have started our network trade platform, and we are in the midst of trial with some major ports in the world, particularly in China. And we should work together to see how we can facilitate this flow so that trade finance and trade insurance should be done very differently. Our banking system should be much more digital. And in that process, I hope that all our banks come on board this movement, work together with us on our network trade platform to look at how we can finance, we can provide trade finance and trade insurance, particularly to our SMEs. And in that way, you're actually not taking higher risk because the data flow and the flow of goods are now far better integrated. Yes. So it's looking for better solutions.
Right. Yeah. So Faisal and Toby, if you could just give us your wish list on what you would like to see in terms of additional measures.
Well, I think that, I appreciate the fact that, the priority of the government is to protect the jobs. I think extremely important.
Right.
And I think that, we should look a little further and encourage companies to do some hiring, increase their hiring at this point in time.
Indeed.
In fact, there are a lot of SMEs who are still very healthy,
Yes.
who would like to hire, but they're holding back.
Yeah.
Perhaps, maybe enhance in the enhanced budget, to have a little bit of a wage sharing or wage support for any new headcount that these companies are going to bring on board. That will encourage good SMEs, strong, healthy SMEs to start hiring right now, because there's going to be talent out in the market. So let's see whether that's possible. Then, we can encourage people to create jobs and at this point in time. I think that's one. Second thing would be, I think a lot of the SME business owners that I've spoken to very concerned about cash flow. And I think that, the things which, for example, like what Linus has said, the support from the banks to have moratorium, maybe on the principal repayment of, property loans or, so for 6 months, just to ease that cash. Right. Perhaps even a moratorium on, tax payments, right, So something like that just to ease the cash so that, they're able to go out there and continue the business, keep the headcount without having to disrupt, their operations.
Right. So that's a very good point in terms of how the hiring can continue. And in fact, in the budget which I unveiled earlier, there is a special program for hiring of those between 40 and 60. Yes. And also enhance credit for SkillsFuture training, enhance the program. And I gave a very specific example of how even a course that costs several $1,000s with SkillsFuture credit and with the grants from the existing program, which is up to 90%, essentially the individual pays zero and still have some money left in the SkillsFuture credit of $500 before the top up. So I hope that companies that are looking at the long term will take this opportunity to hire, and in particular for this group in the 40 to 60 who many of them may have been displaced from existing jobs. I think with this downturn, there may be more in various groups that will be affected. And I think the redistribution of our very scarce labor to productive users can continue. And what you have said is exactly that we should do more of that. And we'll be happy if companies were to do more of this, because take this opportunity to train, develop the new skills, and prepare for the upturn.
The banks, in reaching out to SMEs, are already improving the offers out to the SMEs. So I believe we have something that will meet needs. In fact, in our outreach to our SME customers, already more than 25% are coming back proactively to take up the loan. So I think that gives a sense that we are meeting needs where it's at.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But can the banks do more in that? Because interest rates are set essentially based on the risk of the lender, right? Of the borrower. And if the banks can come and work together, whether with the SME or with the industry, to lower the risk either of the entire industry or of the specific company, then if you take a risk-based approach, the interest rates can then be calibrated according to that. So if you have some ways in which the SME themselves also undertake action to lower its risk, then the interest rates can be favorably considered, right?
Yeah, very much so. So I think to take the point that you were raising earlier on about the network trade platform,
that's right.
There are many efforts that we are working on today, leveraging the data that we have, enabled by digital connectivity. Right? So inside there, you have very clear understanding of orders that are made by anchor buyers, the relationship to their suppliers who are SMEs, the recurring nature of those trades, the stability of the orders that come, certainty of repayment. So all of those are already measured differently. So therefore, better risks are treated with better pricing.
So I would suggest that perhaps our banks can work together with let's say, the Association of SMEs and do some online training for our SMEs to talk about what do we mean by a risk-based approach. Because banks will be happy to lend to companies if the risk is commensurate, with the returns. And in order to expect the banks to have lower returns, it means that the risk should be lowered. So what is it that each SME can do and the trade associations together can do to lower the risk. And if we can do that, everybody benefits. And we should be creative about looking for such solutions.
Right. I think one positive that has come out since the beginning of this year and more since the end of January has been the significant uptake in digital adoption.
Yes.
So whether it's digital banking or even beyond banking solutions, customers inquiring about digital invoicing, matching of orders and payments. So the time is right, so we can leverage these capabilities. We have lots of data previously not used, now very useful, that can help SMEs to take advantage of their situation, to be not only to avail better solutions, but also to build a better business, right? Because they can direct the orders and the business that they do towards a better risk profile.
So on that point, just interestingly, I think you're aware that I spoke about an emerging stronger task force under the Committee on the Future Economy. And we are in the midst of putting out these challenge statements as to what are the challenges worth solving that will benefit. One of the areas which I hope that will be worth solving is certainly how we can support our SMEs better. And there are several ideas which we are looking at. One is that if you look at SMEs operation, they have many common elements. Everyone needs to take orders from customers. In turn, they need to manage their inventory. And the inventory then turns into how they can order the fresh products. They need to do accounting. They need to do auditing. They need to report statements. If they need to pay workers, if they hire workers, they will need to transact with the Ministry of Manpower. If they need to pay special levies, they will need to do that. So there are a whole series of administrative transactions which involve all SMEs. And I hope that audit firms and the accounting firms can come up with solutions that will allow for this to be done much more efficiently, not just for one or two SMEs, but for thousands of SMEs. And this will be a challenge worth solving. The other is what you mentioned about risk management. Can we bring the industry together and find ways in which we can do so, for instance, through digital platforms like what you mentioned, through the network trade platform, then we can put it out as a challenge statement. And in my capacity as chairman of National Research Foundation, I'll be prepared to support measures that will create that sort of innovation. So we are in the midst of putting out these statements, so all of you are welcome, and this will be one of those which I'm happy to support. Yeah.
DPM, if I may come back to the issue of jobs.
Yes.
I think the government's emphasis seems to be to prevent retrenchments as much as possible, and that you have a lot of measures in the budget, although they are time bound. And also, we are aware that NTUC's mantra is we should cut costs to save jobs, not cut jobs to save costs.
Yes.
All that said, we might be in for a long crisis. The medical experts said COVID-19 could last the whole year.
Yes, indeed.
In that event, God forbid, if there are retrenchments, if those happen anyway, what measures can the government come up with to give relief to retrenched workers?
Yes. So our approach is first and foremost to prevent retrenchment, not just for the sake of the workers, but also that I think the companies must take a long view, because for them to just retrench workers at the slightest sign of problem will create longer term problems for the company as well. Because the workers whom you know well, who are familiar with the operations of the company, who can be upgraded to do a higher level job, would have lost all that experience. So I think it's important for companies to take that long view. Now that said, the reason why we are supporting this our job support package for our workers is that we think that if companies face an immediate short-term challenge like this and they don't have the resources to manage it and they start retrenching, they would also be reducing their own capabilities, and therefore it will make any upturn a lot harder for them. So that is the first priority. But the second is that if the companies indeed found that the business model is no longer viable, then I think the releasing those workers to new industries that are growing will be important. And that is where you mentioned about some of the businesses, some of your sectors, they're actually growing. So there will be sectors that will be growing. And in particular, for workers at all levels, whether they are fresh graduates going to join the different sectors, or whether they are older workers who have to retrain for another job, being able to support all our workers in that, and in turn will support our companies in building their capability, will be very important. Now, as for workers who are then retrenched, we're looking at specific measures that may help them, over this period, and I'll be announcing details of this later. Yeah.
Is this part of the package that will be coming
Yes,
out?
this will be part of the package. Yeah.
Okay, very good. You had also mentioned that companies should make the most out of what is available.
Yes.
And I think there are so many schemes that have been launched. Apart from industry transformation maps, there's a productivity solutions grant, there's the SME Go Digital program, etc. And some of these you've enhanced in the recent budget.
Right.
But I think a lot of people make the point, I think, which you just made, that the problem is not the shortage of schemes.
Right.
The problem is that these schemes are not being used sufficiently.
Right.
And I think, Faisal, you had an article about 4 days ago where you said that SMEs are running into bureaucratic obstacles in getting access to some of these schemes, apart from the interest rate point.
Sure.
Apart from that, so you had mentioned this. Could you elaborate on what kind of obstacles they're facing?
I think basically what they've fed back is, the process of approval and assessment is far too long.
Right.
And you'll miss that window of opportunity
Right.
that they might get, essentially we know that the bureaucrats are stretched, but some of these sectors are very advanced or innovative, and the bureaucrats might not know the type of business model that could actually vary in the same sector as well.
Right.
So this kind of knowledge, industry knowledge is not there. So it's fine deep to talk about going digital, but the ecosystem of the company, the culture in terms of the uptake and the leadership, which I think you've addressed partly in terms of the budget here, were elements that were missing if they mentioned from earlier budgets that talk about going digital.
Right.
So the awareness is great, and the uptake also is a problem because they have not assessed the health and the complexity of their own processes.
Right.
So if they just jump on the bandwagon and get a technology or a gadget that's expensive, it becomes a white elephant.
Absolutely.
Without the human capital or the leadership to actually see it through in terms of the transformation.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's a very good point, and that is why, as part of the Committee of the Future Economies work,
Right.
we started this 23 industry transformation maps. We now have a better understanding, and the key idea behind the industry transformation map is not only do we bring the industry together and to solve common challenges, but we solve the challenges in an integrated way, rather than in an integrated way, in a company-centric way, rather than our former approach, which is agency-centric. So the agency that is encouraging companies to train workers will go and say, well, why don't you take a grant to train workers? Yes. And the agency who is encouraging companies to adopt technology solutions say, why don't you adopt technology solution? So I had a business leader who spoke to me at the early stage of the CFE work, and he said, Minister, why are your agencies going around getting companies to take grant?
So the KPIs.
Is it a KPI? So he said there was an agency who came to me to look at how we can train our workers, and another agency came, unknown to him, that 2 weeks ago another agency came to ask me to adopt a tax solution. So if I have adopted a tax solution, I would have to train my workers very differently, and in fact I may not need to train as many workers, and I would need some way to release the workers to other sectors. So as a result of all this discussion, this Secretary General Ng Chee Meng at the NTUC side have also created this scheme to have both the Company Training Committee and the Jobs Security Council, where companies which are going to release workers are able to tell us in advance how many and what are their profiles, and in that way we can provide the training, and that provides for a smoother transition. So there are many of this work in progress, but I would say that the key in all this is first, we will need to review many of our processes, right? And I'll be happy to receive feedback on how this can be done. But at the same time, I want to caution that as a public sector, we also want to have proper accountability for the spending of public funds. So while from a company's point of view, I may not need to worry about who authorizes funding and how much is authorized, because it's my company and one company. But from a public sector point of view, I cannot have one set of rules for company A and another set for company B. And we have to ensure that it is fair to all, and there has to be proper public accountability. So that said, we are trying to collapse as many of these different schemes as possible into one, so that companies do not have to go from one agency to another agency. We can do it in a much more integrated way. It is work in progress. So for instance, MTI has put together the various schemes into enterprise development grants. Yeah, that's one. And two, it's important for us to raise our management capability across companies. And that is where I hope that our trade associations and chambers can play a role. One reason why we have the Enterprise Leadership Transformation Program, for which we are hoping that we can help to raise the leadership capabilities of many of our companies, is precisely for that purpose. Because the leader of the company managing his team must have that more strategic view and be more creative at problem solving and in bringing together the team. Whereas we must expect that when we do business, there'll be all kinds of problems and obstacles. So on the part of the government agencies, we'll try to make it easier. But I would say that there are certain KPIs of our agencies, in particular the proper use of public funds, that we need to observe.
Sure.
So if we have a better understanding of each other's needs, we can think of more innovative solutions to solve this problem.
Right.